Hi, this is Greg from Greg's Space Shed. Welcome to the lesson. We're going to be looking at arpeggios, major and minor arpeggios with their first and second inversions. Last week we looked at 5 essential scales for bass. If you're not sure of your major and minor scales, then it might be good to look at that video now before you go on to arpeggios. I've written a PDF of all the arpeggios we're going to cover in this lesson, so if you want that along with the tab, then click the link in the description, leave your email address and I'll send that to you. That would be really useful to help you practice and learn the shapes of the arpeggios. After we've looked at all the arpeggios and their inversions, I'll show you a few bass lines that are constructed out of arpeggios. So what are arpeggios? Arpeggios are broken chords, so they're all the notes of the chord played one after each other rather than together. They're really useful as they outline the chord, giving you a real flavour of what the chord sounds like rather than playing all the notes of the scale. We're going to look at a major arpeggio first. A major arpeggio is made up of the first, the third and the fifth note of a major scale. So for C major arpeggio, that's a C, an E and a G, and then we play the high C as well. So I'll play you C major arpeggio 1 octave. So to play that, we start with our second finger on C. So like we're going to start a major scale, but we play second finger on C. Then we're going to play an E, which is the second fret of the D string, with our first finger. And then with our fourth finger, we're going to play G, which is the fifth fret of the D string, and then high C, C an octave above the root, which is the fifth fret of the G string. We'll play with our fourth finger. So with me, 3, 4. Back down again. Again with me, 3, 4. So that's C major arpeggio 1 octave. We can also play it here, starting on the C, which is the 8th fret of the E string. And it's useful to know that position because we're now going to play C major arpeggio 2 octaves. So we're going to add another octave on top. So the best way to do that, I'll play that for you first, you can have a look. So there are quite a few ways to play this. The easiest way with the least jumping that I'll show you is starting, so we'll start with the C there, the 8th fret of the E string, with our second finger. Play the first 3 notes of the major arpeggio, and then we're going to jump to the high C here. So, and we'll land on our second finger. So. Once we get there, we can just play the same shape for the 1 octave major arpeggio. So the first 3 notes down here, and then the major arpeggio there. With me slowly, 3, 4. Okay, so that's fairly tricky, it's quite a lot of jumping, so practice that slowly. Once you get to here, to the G, practice that jump. Because you're going to go up and you're going to come down there. So little finger on the G, second finger on the C. So when you come to play it, that's the tricky bit nailed down. So practice that really slowly at first, 1 octave and 2 octaves. Look at the PDF, and as I said, I've got tab as well if you can't read music, but it's always good to try to learn to read music so you can reference them both. So now I'm going to play you C minor arpeggio. It's the same as the major, but the third, like when we do our minor scale, is flattened. So if we start with our first finger on C, like when we'd start a minor scale, and we use the first, third, fifth and the octave of the C minor scale. So first finger, fourth finger, third finger, third finger, and come back down. With me, 3, 4. Again, 3, 4. So that's C minor 1 octave, and we're going to play the 2 octaves. So again, we want to play our C on the 8th fret of the E string, but this time we're going to play it with our first finger. So we start with our first finger and play the first 3 notes of the minor arpeggio. And then we're going to jump to the C again. But if we play it with our third finger, and then we've got the minor third there. So we could actually play it, but it's a bit tight on this bass and probably for your bass as well. So it's just a bit easier to play it here. But that is the minor arpeggio shape. We're just playing the second note of it there instead of there. Okay. So maybe just practice this way of playing the minor arpeggio 1 octave with me. 3, 4. And again. So if we start at the beginning, so again you're going to need to practice jumping from the G. So you stay on the same finger. So you're jumping from those 2 positions. So that's C minor arpeggio 1 and 2 octaves. So obviously for any note, starting on any note, it's the same shape. So you just really want to learn that major and minor shape, then you can play it all over the neck. So really slowly at first, make sure you're really comfortable, you know the shapes, and then you can speed it up. So we're going to move on to the inversions now. So that's sheet 2 of the PDF. So an inversion is just starting the arpeggio on another note. So we've got a choice of 3 notes. We've got the, say for C major arpeggio, we've got C, E and G. So if we start on C, like we have been doing up to now, that's just the root position. And if we go to E, which is the next note, if we start the arpeggio on E, that's the first inversion. And if we start the arpeggio on G, that's the second inversion. So for a major and minor arpeggio, you've got root position, first inversion and second inversion. So if you've been reading chord charts, then you've probably seen a slash chord. So it's, so for example, C/E. And if you don't know, what they actually means is you play an E in the bass. So when you see C/E, it means you play an E. So you're actually playing the first inversion of that chord. If you listen to, say, Elton John, for example, he uses a lot of first and second inversions. You can hear it on the piano and in the bass. For example, listen to Your Song. There's a lot of first inversions in there. So if we look at C major arpeggio first inversion, so we'll start on open on the bottom E of the bass. So I'll play it for you first. So we're going to do one jump in this. Now it's a different shape, even though it's a major arpeggio, because we're doing it in inversion, it will feel different under your fingers. So we start with open on the E, and then first finger on the 3rd fret, that's G, and first finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, and that's C. And then we're going to jump to the 7th fret with our first finger, so the E there. And we're going to do first finger on 7, full finger on 10, full finger on 10 on the D string, and then 3rd finger on 9 on the G string. So up there, first bit. Bear with me. 3, 4. And then the next bit, jump up to 7. With me. 3, 4. And then back down. So all of that. 3, 4. So that's C major, first inversion. And then we're going to look at C major arpeggio, second inversion. So the second inversion starts on G. So I'll play that for you first. So we start with our second finger on G, so third fret of the E string. And then we go to C, third fret of the A string. And then on the D string we play an E and a G, so first and fourth finger. So that bit, with me, 3, 4. And again, 3, 4. And we jump to C, which is 10 on the D string. And then the first 3 notes of the major arpeggio. With me, 3, 4. So all of that. So again, you want to practice that jump from G with your little finger to C with your second finger. That's a tricky bit from this arpeggio. And as much as possible, try to keep your hand shape when you jump. I mean, it will move a bit, but the one to C minor arpeggio, first inversion. Now you need a 5 string for this because you've got a low E flat, which is the minor third. So obviously you can't play that low E flat on a 4 string. So I'll demonstrate it for you on a 5 string, and then we'll just look at 1 octave on the 4 string. So we're going to start this on the E flat, and from the PDF, if you're looking at that, we're going to start from the 3rd note. So C minor arpeggio, first inversion, starts on an E flat. And if you're looking at the PDF, that will be the 4th note of the PDF. Because it actually steps down and then the low E flat. So if we do our first finger on E flat, and then jump, shift along 1 fret your whole hand, and your little finger play it on the 10th fret. So that's G. So E flat to G, C. So E flat to G, C, and then fret 8 on the G string, which is E flat again. And I've done this fingering because on the 2 octave version, and we go down to there, but you can also play the 1 octave starting with your second finger on E flat, and so 6th fret, 5th fret, 5th fret and 8th fret. So obviously there are a few different ways to play the arpeggios, and it's good to just try different positions. So depending where you are in a bass line, or if you're doing a solo or a fill, you've got some options of ways to play it. So if we move on to C minor, second inversion, that starts on a G. So first finger on G, and then on the A string, first finger on the 3rd fret, which is the C, and your little finger on E flat, which is the 6th fret, and then the 5th fret on the D string, which is G. So the first 4 notes with me, 3, 4. And then we jump up to the C with our 3rd finger. So C there on the 10th fret of the D string, and then the 8th fret of the G string, and then we jump 1 to the 12th fret of the G string. So with me, 3, 4. And that's C minor arpeggio, 2nd inversion, starting on the G. Inversions are really useful to get bass players out of a root-centric approach, where you're thinking solely of the root, of starting on the root. And now that's really important for most bass lines, but if you're doing walking lines or fills, it's nice to start on an inversion. It gives it a different sound and just makes it more interesting. So here are a few bass lines that are constructed out of arpeggios. So the first one is One Step Beyond by Madness. So we've got this pattern here. So that's just a minor arpeggio on C, minor arpeggio on F, and then it goes down to the G with a major arpeggio. And then we have Mellowness Slinky in B major by Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that was the bass line I was playing at the start of the video. So that's actually the major 3rd, so that's a major arpeggio on B. Really nice bass line there. It's given me an idea. Actually, I'll probably do a full version of that in my bassline breakdown series, where I teach all of that. So watch this space, and I'll do that video soon. And another tune is Three Little Birds by Bob Marley. So that's just a major arpeggio on A and a major arpeggio on D. So as you can see, arpeggios are really useful in constructing bass lines. So make sure you download the PDF and practice the major and minor arpeggios with their inversions. Next week I'm going to look at Bullet in the Head by Rage Against the Machine. That's got a really nice pentatonic riff in it, so it's a follow-up really on last week's lesson on scales. I've got some great video lessons planned, so make sure you subscribe. I release a video every Friday. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you want any help or you've got any comments, then write them below. I'll always check those every week. Definitely suggest any videos you'd like me to do. This is Greg from Greg's Bass Shed. Keep practicing and I'll see you next week.